Hey there, digital world. Welcome back to another episode of Spliced in Later. Has it been a long time since I last spoke to you all? I don't know. I think it's only been a week. I guess this last week has really blurred together. I don't know who I am or what's going on. Well, I guess that means it must be time for a break soon. Anyway, we are here for another episode of Spliced in Later. Nothing new really to talk about, at least for me here. No movies have come out recently that I want to see. They have in other countries. Haunted Mansion's out, Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem's out, Blue Beetle comes out this week, which I'm very keen for. Here in the good old land of Oz, none of them are available as of yet. You can just go see Barbie and over again though, so I guess that's something. Hopefully in the next few weeks, these movies will start dropping here one way or another, and I'll be able to review and talk to them about it to you. And in future stuff, we'll be talking about some more MCU stuff. I'll try and come up with some more top 10s to do, because those are always fun. Look into some TV shows. There'll be definitely some content. But for now, what we are doing this week is something that has actually been requested of me by a dear friend of mine. I don't know how the episode's going to go, because I watched these movies quite a few weeks ago. I've seen them a few times, though, and they are... Well, some of them are some of my favorite movies. I do like them a lot, and I think I can talk about it in a specific way today. But if it seems vague, scatterbrained, unsure, then I don't know why you're worried, because that's business as usual here on Spliced in Later. So shout out to my good friend Eamon, if you are listening to this, and I hope you're listening to this because you asked for it. You're welcome, and I hope it is a pleasant listening experience for you, and I talk about things you wanted me to talk about. If I don't, I tried. What we are talking about today is The Mummy. Not the Tom Cruise Mummy. I will not be talking about that one. A, because I haven't seen it. And B, because I don't want to. No, we're talking about The Good Mummy, the 1999 Steven Soderbergh movie. Soderbergh, maybe? A director whose name sounds sort of like that. Starring the wonderful... man, the myth, the legend that is Brendan Fraser as Rick O'Connell, and supported by wonderful supporting actors like Rachel Weisz, John Hannah, Arnold Vosloo. A wonderful adventure/horror film, maybe, about these wacky characters dealing with the return of an ancient mummy. A movie that resonated with a lot of people, was very popular, did well both critically and commercially, so naturally that means make a franchise out of it. Now, having just watched these films, for a long time, I was of the belief that The Mummy is a really great film, but I always thought The Mummy Returns, which came out in 2002, was a better film. Having just rewatched them both back to back, I can say that even though The Mummy Returns, for me personally, is still probably my more preferred film, that's not on a critical, technical scale, I think. I think it's just... it's the classic case I've always talked about on this show of whether you like Rocky 2 more than Rocky, or Creed 2 more than Creed, or any other boxing sequel to the original boxing film. It's what you want out of the movie. Do you want the original established film that set everything up and introduced all our characters, or you do want the sequel where you don't have to worry about doing all that because you've got your favorite characters, so they can just get right to it? It's the Beverly Hills Cop, Beverly Hills Cop 2. Beverly Hills Cop is a better movie, and it establishes that Axel and his Beverly Hills Cop's friends, Taggart and Rosewood, will become the dynamic trio. But for Beverly Hills Cop 2, we don't need to worry about that. We get right to it. And the interplay between those characters is always the best part of those movies. But looking back on these ones, from a personal level, I enjoy The Mummy Returns more. But in terms of story, technology, execution, everything like that, The Mummy is superior in every regard. I didn't rewatch the third one, The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, because as you know, or maybe you don't know, but it is not very liked compared to the other ones. It was made a lot later in 2008. Rachel Weisz was unable to return to play her role, so she was recast by Maria Bello. There is no original mummy. It's a new storyline involving Michelle Yeoh and some other mummies. And it seems a bit more Hollywood manufactured style. There's a lot going on there where I think it's lost its magic and zest and appeal. It's not terrible by any means, but if you're looking for what you got out of those first two Mummy films, it's not exactly there. It's imagine how I guess people feel about the fourth Indiana Jones film, saying it doesn't match the style and scope and wonder of the original three. And maybe they're right. I really don't know. I hate Indiana Jones 5, so I can understand hatred for an Indiana Jones film. But there that is. So I won't be talking about Tomb of the Dragon Emperor that much in here. I might touch on it at the end, but it's not a perfect analysis of all three films. It's just more of the franchise in general and a specific thing I want to talk about it, which is an interesting thing to discuss, I think. If you're listening to this and you're like, I've never seen The Mummy, why not? It's a great movie, especially now that Brendan Fraser has come back into the spotlight where he rightfully belongs and getting the recognition he deserves. If you're unfamiliar with what I'm talking about here, Brendan Fraser was a big star in the 90s, maybe late 80s, I'm not sure. But aside from these films, he was in a whole bunch of stuff. Probably tipped to be like he's getting up there to be one of those hunky, big leading man actor style in the way of Brad Pitt or Matt Damon or something like that. And then he started appearing in less critically successful movies, sort of dropped off the radar a bit, more on direct to red box type films, and then sort of vanished. The truth behind that is very upsetting and a real reflection on how Hollywood might look all glitzy and glamoury, but behind it are a bunch of terrible people who will belittle and destroy these people. It's a cruel business that can suck you up and destroy you if things don't work out your way. I will not go into any of it because A, I don't know enough of it to comment on it, and two, it's not my business to be talking about really. But suffice it to say, Brendan Fraser suffered tremendously, both career-wise, personal-wise, mental health-wise, ton of stuff. In recent years, he's managed to make a comeback. He first jumped on the scene for me when he was on Doom Patrol, a very great DC show, which may or may not have been lost to oblivion thanks to the merging of HBO Max and all that shit going on, about a bunch of really wacky, misfit, B-grade DC superhero characters who just get caught up in awful scenarios. But at the end of the day, it's really not a superhero show, it's a character drama. Brendan Fraser provides the voice for Robot Man, who's a guy called Cliff Steele, who was a bit of a jackass in life. Then he was in a terrible racing accident, had his brain put in a robot body, which can't feel, can't touch, all of that stuff. He was great. He's the best part of it. He swears like a sailor, and I love it. And then in recent years, he's appeared in more big budget stuff. His acting's been recognized. And as of when I'm recording this in 2023, he won the best actor for his performance in The Whale, which, regardless of what you think of The Whale as a movie or Darren Aronofsky as a director, his performance in that, his transformation, where he pulled his real life struggles and trauma to make this performance go ahead, fantastic stuff. So check it out if you want. I don't care. Just appreciate Brendan Fraser for who he is. So he stars in The Mummy, which was sort of like it was an understanding of that horror classic monster movies from Universal way back in the 30s and 40s. You know, your Frankenstein, your Dracula, your werewolf, all of those characters. I don't believe The Mummy was meant to launch something like that. I'll touch on that a little bit. But it was taking that concept of those earlier movies of a horrific monster type creature involved in a Indiana Jones style swashbuckling pulp adventure story with our hero, the plucky female love interest, the wacky sidekick, some asshole characters getting eviscerated and killed. In the course of The Mummy, basically it's about the mummy himself is Imhotep, played by Arnold Vosloo. In a very long prologue of sorts, you understand who he is. He fooled around with the wrong woman and ended up being punished into being a mummy, I guess, you know, wrapped up, put in a sarcophagus, dunk things up your nose, all of that terrible shit. Cursed, essentially. Later on in the present day, a whole bunch of different parties are racing to where he's buried because they all want to make a great discovery and find riches and all those different things. He is a mercenary sort of character who is hired by book smart, non-adventurous style Rachel Weisz and her good-hearted but cowardly and kind of selfish brother, played by John Hannah, because he has been there before. He doesn't really want to go back because it's full of screaming sand and devilish things going on, but he will because money. They all go back. They all start digging around. Whoops! They accidentally They released the mummy. Who then is not completely back. Has to hunt down some specific American adventurers who opened him up. He basically will take their essence, their soul, to rebuild himself. Their tongues, their eyes, all of that, along with his army of scarabs that eat people down to the flesh and bone. And with a fixation on Rachel Weisz because he believes that she is his love of his life, a Mek Sunda Moon, whatever her name is, reincarnated, and wants to use her to bring her back one way or another. So even though Brendan Fraser would never admit it, he's desperately in love with her and will go against the mummy to protect her and save her, and maybe make a little money on the side. Who knows? It's a fantastic movie. It's very successful in the adventurous style film. I believe I touched on this a lot when I reviewed Jungle Cruise a couple years ago with Dwayne Johnson and Emily Blunt. That completely follows the mummy formula. You're a swashbuckling hero, the plucky heroine. Jack Whitehall in that one was the snivelly, cowardly brother character who also goes along with the adventure, dealing with cursed creatures in the Amazon, looking for ancient mystic treasure that will bring untold riches, good or bad, to whoever gets it. It really is the same sort of style. I really like Jungle Cruise. I can understand people would watch Jungle Cruise and be like, this is just a mummy, but less good. That's also fine. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, I guess. Great music, great direction, great performances. Surprisingly, the CG is used sparingly, which is complementary to the movie. It's kind of like the Jaws shark in Jaws. The Jaws shark does not look that great. If you looked at it too much, you'd be like, that's just a rubbery piece of shit. But by using him sparingly, you're like, okay, he's scary. The CG for The Mummy obviously wasn't great. It was probably good for the time. Not great, I imagine. Probably on the level of PlayStation 1 video game stuff. But it was only used in very small circumstances. In other instances, it's practical effects, it's matte paintings, it's animatronics, it's the makeup crew just going to town on people's faces to really make people look gross and disgusting, which adds that essence of gritty horror to the movie, which I think works really, really great. Where that fell down for The Mummy Returns was a lean towards CGI over that stuff. There's a lot more CGI in The Mummy Returns, and because for 2002 it might have been okay, it's not so great now, it doesn't hold up particularly well. Every time the mummy is screaming in a tornado or a waterfall, it doesn't look particularly great. And we also know The Mummy Returns is infamously the worst CG of all time, with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in one of his first film roles playing the Scorpion King. When he is brought in at the end of the film where he's become like a scorpion creature, he looks like he fell straight out of a PlayStation 1 game. And he bursts onto the scene. When you see him, you're not scared, you're not in shock and awe, you're like, what the hell is that? Oh my god. But Mummy Returns works, I think, because it really builds on our established characters. I haven't mentioned Oded Fehr as well, who's like, in the first film, he seems to be an antagonist, but he's a protector of the mummy curse, and he wants to save the world from the evil that's coming out. Once you realize he's a good guy, in the second one, he starts right off hanging out with the good guys, like the fourth musketeer, riding around on the bus in London, fighting off monsters and creatures. In this instance, the mummy's back. He really, really, really wants to resurrect the Scorpion King, to have his army to take over the world. Sandra Bullock has shown up and said, hey, I am actually your reincarnated love. You don't need Rachel Weisz anymore. But there's an issue now with Rick and Rachel Weisz's son, who has got a bracelet that's been stuck to him, which will lead him to the Scorpion King army. So he gets abducted. So everybody has to race after him and go on another adventure. In essence, it is inferior to the first, but I get a lot out of it. I think the music is better in the second one than the first. The triumphant, celebratory music that I think is famous for The Mummy. If you ride the Mummy ride at Universal Studios, the triumphant music at the end when the ride is over, that's from The Mummy Returns. It's earworm sort of music that you just get really pumped to listening to. So still a great film. Again, The Mummy, from a technical standpoint, in every regard, is probably better, but you can still have a lot of fun when Mummy returns. It gets it right when it needs to, in terms of keeping the theme and mode. By the time you get to Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, you've lost Rachel Weisz, you've lost The Mummy. CG has firmly taken over the film at this point. Whatever they're making Brendan Fraser go through is clearly known here. Some poor acting, some very confusing stakes. Michelle Yeoh's great in it, but she's great in everything, so that's not a surprise. It is a disappointing end to that trilogy, but it could be worse. And by it could be worse, it could be 2017's Mummy, which it is not. And a side note, which is funny for this 2017 Mummy, if you don't know this, it's actually hilarious. This is back in a time where, because the Marvel Cinematic Universe was doing so well and so successfully, every studio, every franchise wanted to capitalize that and make their own. The Dark Universe film franchise is the funniest example of how that can just be a complete disaster. So The Mummy starring Tom Cruise was designed to be like the first entry, the Iron Man of this world. Tom Cruise would take on the Mummy. I assume by the end he becomes a mummy. I'm not exactly sure. I've not seen the movie. But during the course of the movie, he also interacts with Russell Crowe's Dr. Jekyll. Have a bit of Jekyll and Hyde going on. But Dr. Jekyll is like the head of this super secret institution, and he's acting like a Nick Fury style character who's like, I got to bring all these monsters together one day to fight a true evil. The plan was that The Mummy would lead into an Invisible Man movie, a werewolf movie, something else, Dracula maybe? I can't exactly remember. Obviously none of that happened because The Mummy was both a critical and commercial disaster, so there was no way they were ever going to get it off the ground. You can't build your film franchise, your cinematic universe, off of failure. But these people in their hubris, in their foolishness, went, we're going to be successful regardless. So what do? They get all these actors, they get Javier Bardem, they get Johnny Depp, announce that they're playing these future characters. They get them all together to take a picture in front of this black background, release it to the masses in big press releases on their Twitter page, being like, the Dark Universe is coming. They make a little logo, they're ready to go. Crashes and burns. But that record still exists. If you go to the Dark Universe Twitter page, it still exists. They've never taken it down, and it only has 2 posts. It has the first post with the logo saying the Dark Universe is coming, and the second post with all those actors sitting around in chairs together being like, we're ready to go. And then nothing. It's hilarious. It's like when you go back to 2011, when the X-Men universe was going on, they had the Days of Future Past coming, Deadpool was coming, so they were taking all these big cast photos with like the old X-Men characters, Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, the new ones, James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender. Ryan Reynolds is in there for Deadpool, Hugh Jackman is in there for Wolverine, and then sitting in the middle is Channing Tatum. He was supposed to play Gambit in a Gambit movie. That never happened. But he is preserved for eternity in this group cast picture of all these famous X-Men actors all across these different films and franchises. And then there's Channing Tatum just sitting there, looking lovely because Channing Tatum is a lovely person, but funny. Anyway, that's a segue. It's got nothing really to do with their old mummies of old. It's just a fun little story for you. One thing I wanted to ask everybody who's listening here, especially if you are a fan of The Mummy, is how would you classify this film, all these films, all the franchise? Would you say it's an adventure-style film, like Indiana Jones? Or would you say it's a straight-up horror film, like Dracula or Frankenstein? Arguments can be made for both. I went in to watch this film with my friends, and people were like, yeah, get some horror in. It's like, it's not a horror. It's adventure. It's, swashbuckling Rick O'Connell's going to save the day and defeat the bad guys, and we'll have a laugh along the way. And then immediately the prologue to The Mummy was Arnold Vosloo getting captured and entombed in a sarcophagus, and you can see all his friends and henchmen having things shoved up their noses, and they're describing that their entrails are being removed and that they're in there scraping at the coffins to get out. That's unsettling stuff. That's quite horrifying. And then I forgot, of course, during the movie that when the mummy comes back, he has to track down these specific people and steal their essence, steal their soul for the mummy to come back. And that leads to like people walking around going, it took my tongue, or my eyes are gone, I can't see. Or even a moment where one guy has to let the others escape, get to the plane so they can stop the mummy. So he stays in a street and fights all these zombies and just gets swarmed, and I assume ripped to pieces. Horror stuff. It sounds horrifying. It's really disturbing. So I ask it to you. When you think of the Mummy, do you think more horror or do you think more adventure? I can understand on the outset, it's probably more horror. A fun story for everybody listening. I didn't watch The Mummy until I was an adult who could watch things in the safety of his own home with the blinds open and everything that I've gone before. The very first time I encountered The Mummy was in a Pizza Hut. I was there as a kid, eating pizza with my family, and Pizza Hut used to have this deal where if you bought a certain combo of movies or whatever, you got a video. You got a video with a double feature of whatever was on there. And I believe The Mummy and The Mummy Returns was one of the options. And I think my dad was like, oh, you got to get The Mummy. And I looked at the poster and it's immortalized just the face screaming in the sand. There's no Brendan Fraser anywhere to be seen on it. And I'm like, not on your Nelly. I'm too scared. As I've said before, my ability to not watch scary movies was basically, I don't like being scared. If it looks like it's going to be scary, I ain't touching it with a 4-foot pole. It worked out in the end for me anyway, because the combination films that we got were Mystery Men and Galaxy Quest, two of the greatest films of all time. So, you know, where one door closes, another opens. But now watching it, don't have a problem with it, obviously, but it didn't even occur to me that I should be scared watching it. So I think what it comes down to, it's a nice balance between the two. A full-blown horror film is designed to unsettle you, to scare you, to keep you on edge, to feel the tension rise, a bit of unease, all of that stuff. An adventure-style film is, all right, we're ready to go with our heroes into the unknown, but we're going to have a few laughs along the way and learn things about ourselves and discover truly fantastical things. So I think The Mummy, and to essence, Indiana Jones, probably even Jurassic Park as well. It's taking horror elements, but not letting them define the story. Not in a way like Alien is a science fiction film on paper, but in actuality, it's a horror slasher film because it is an alien stalking you in the shadows, cutting you up, eating you, spitting acid on you, making you feel uncomfortable. With this and Jurassic Park, for example, the dinosaurs eating people by design is scary. That's a horror thing. But they are also played up as these magical, impressive things, which will only hurt you if you do the wrong thing or get caught in the wrong place. And through it all, there's wonderful music, there's silly characters laughing, there's some humor going on. It manages to walk the line between the two, where it's not cheesy and corny, but it's not full-blown wet your pants scary. And I think that's the case for The Mummy here, at least having thought about it these last few weeks. While on paper and on essence, there's some truly fucked up stuff in there, and the second one, and even the third one. It never fully allows you to be engrossed by that concept, to really think about it too much to be disturbed, because you're too busy going, oh, Rick O'Connell just got punched out by the girl he likes. Oh, funny day. So there that is. I guess I can put that to you. It's really to each their own how they feel about these movies and what they classify them as. The idea of classifying every movie in a distinct category is literally impossible because everybody has different taste and there's no one genre that can define a movie. To say there is just an action film is foolish because there's always like an essence of thriller or science fiction or whatever is defining that story. Comedy, there's probably a little drama in there. It's a dramedy, whatever. So there that is. I guess at the end of the day, what's the point of this episode? Well, it's to appease my good friend Eamon, and I hope I've done so. But also, the Mummy films, the first two, are really great. They are a good testament to Brendan Fraser's acting ability. They are a good example of late 90s, early 2000s adventure-style films. They're completely rewatchable. Most of the CG does hold up when used sparingly. It can be rewatched, and even though you know what's coming, you can still enjoy it over and over again. The music's fantastic. Truly one of the better adventure films that are out there. And even truly one of the better horror films, if that's the angle you're leaning to at that point. So go watch them if you haven't seen them. Don't confuse them with the Tom Cruise Mummy. If Tom Cruise is on the front, don't even bother. I mean, that's not fair. I haven't seen it. It might be alright. Might be. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed. So I should be back. Of course I'll be back. I just don't know when. I believe it might be time for a wee break, just to rest, recharge, regroup with what I'm going to do next over the next few weeks for this podcast. Or I could just come back with something because I discover another movie as great as Nimona and I want to talk about it. Who knows? Only time will tell. So we'll just have to wait and see. But until then, thank you very much for listening to me. As always, it does mean a lot to me, regardless of how long you listen to me, regardless of if you agree or disagree with what I'm saying, or regardless that you're doing it out of a obligation or necessity. It's appreciated regardless. So yeah, love you all, and I'll catch you on the next Spliced In later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.